Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Todd Golden, head coach at the University of San Francisco, and it's really an honor to have been asked to be a part of the first ever Swish 21 put on by Hudl. I'm a huge fan of Hudl. I know our staff uses it a ton when we break down film of our opponents, and like I said, just appreciate being included, and I'm really excited to talk to these groups of coaches today on the topic of analytics in basketball. And, what we're going to focus on is really winning in the margins, finding little incremental advantages in the different parts of your program and in game that I think it could be beneficial to use across all levels of basketball, not just Division I, but at the high school level, junior college level, or any college level. All right. And as we go through it here, the most important thing that I think we start with is really getting a fundamental understanding of how do we define analytics specifically in the game of basketball? And once we get through that, I think it'll give us a good foundation to then explore different ways that you could implement it in game. We'll talk about shot selection, talk about, fouling or not fouling. Another area is two-foul participation that I think is really important. And then some other areas where on a macro level that we feel like analytics really has helped us build and develop our program, whether it be through practice data, total data collection, which I think is really important, and then how to improve your team's shooting abilities or how you can use it in recruiting, scheduling, a bunch of different fundamental areas that are really important to be successful at the college level. Okay. So like I said, we'll start out pretty elementary, but again, super important to understand and distinguish the difference here. What is the difference between stats and analytics? All right. And it's a huge difference. And I think sometimes they kind of get thrown together. So simply put, statistics is the practice or science of collecting numerical data in large quantities. A good way to think about this is box scores in basketball. All right. After every halftime, really in college, usually at the end of every media timeout, our director of basketball ops brings our coaching staff box scores. We look at them at halftime, we look at them at the end of the game. And then over the course of a 32-game college season, we get a lot of stats that we're able to cobble together. And then, so what's the difference between stats and analytics? Well, analytics is simply the information that you derive from the systematic analysis of this data or stats. Okay. So stats is what you get in the box score. And then when you analyze them, the analytics of it is what you can come up with and the advantages or disadvantages or information that come from studying that information that you get. Okay. And so again, we talk about how it's the information of resulting from the analysis of the data, and how I specifically in our program really think about it is where can we find incremental advantages against our opponents, whether it's in game or whether it's, macro level, to give us the best chance to be more successful or to be successful, period. Okay. And, one thing that I like to talk about and hit on is, why is there at times a negative perception of analytics in sport? And I think, again, people have a struggle at times understanding the fundamentals of it. And a lot of times in basketball, people think of analytics as simply being, it's either why isn't the mid-range efficient and why are a ton of people shooting threes? All right. And again, the analytical discussion goes a lot further than that. It's a lot more than just threes and twos. All right. So the first thing, again, in game that we'll talk about is shot selection and why that's very important. And then again, we'll talk about 2-for-1s, two-foul participation. All right. So kind of diving into the shot selection, a general question that a lot of people, as they begin to study and learn analytics, is, are all three-pointers good and are all mid-range jumpers and floaters bad? And I think when people think of analytics, they say, oh yeah, that's definitely true. All threes are good. All mid-ranges are bad. And it's black and white like that. And the real answer is that's incorrect. It's just not accurate. And Ben Falk, who was the former VP of the 76ers and an analytics guy for the Blazers, has this quote that I've added to this presentation. I think it's really important, so I'm going to read it here. And he mentions not all mid-range shots are created equal. It's very true. Not all threes are created equal. Also accurate. Saying a team will score more by attempting more threes and fewer mid-range shots is like saying someone will be healthier by eating less and drinking more. That may be true, but unless they're eating fewer whole foods and drinking more soda, the details matter, okay? And we can't speak so broadly and say all mid-ranges are bad and all threes are good. just like we can't say all food is bad and all drinks are good. All right. We need to be very specific in the details here. And I think that's something that gets lost in translation, and putting that kind of, under the microscope. What does that mean? Well, just shooting a three, if you're shooting a step back three that's contested off the dribble, that's not a good shot. All right. Regardless of whether it's a 3 or 2, we definitely don't want to be taking those in the mid range, but that doesn't mean it's a good shot just because it's a 3. All right. And if I have, in my program, I've identified maybe 4 or 5 guys that I feel like will shoot at a high clip if they shoot good, uncontested mid-range jumpers, where that might be off the dribble in a pick and roll. That might be driving a closeout, where if they can live in that mid-range where it's not a contested shot, it's in rhythm, guys on our team know that they're taking them. Those are really good shots. All right. So even a guy like me who really believes in analyzing the data and plays by an analytical mindset, not all threes are good and not all mid-ranges are bad. Right. You got to be able to sift through that and dive into it a little deeper to get a better understanding of what's a good shot for your team and what's a bad shot for your team. This is a super awesome graphic by Kurt Goldsberry. And it's something that I think is really interesting to look at. And this is taking a look at the 2 different time periods in the NBA. Okay. And it just shows how much the game has changed and how much analytics has driven certain things, whether it be shot selection or different things in the game. And this is taking a look at the left side of our screen here is when Michael Jordan played in the NBA. All right. This is, back, I guess, in the mid to late 90s. You see these hot spots here. The baseline mid-range jumper was something that a lot of teams live by. And, that's something that obviously over the past 20 years, if you then look to the right of your screen to today's NBA, that shot's evaporated. Teams don't take that anymore. It was a super inefficient shot, one that you would never get fouled on. So you had to make it for it to be efficient. And teams weren't shooting a 50% clip on it. Therefore, it was a very inefficient shot. And now you see, obviously, teams now in the NBA, they're living at the 3-point line, and then they're living right here in the paint. All right. And a lot of these on the right side of your screen, that red hot spot, right by the bottom of the key there, are layups, close floaters, shots that are close to the rim. But you see, there's very, very few, if any, mid-range jumpers taken in the NBA. Now, you're going to have your guys like Chris Paul, right? You're going to have your guys like Kevin Durant, guys that are such phenomenal players that anytime you get them a shot, it's efficient, okay? It's something that, hold on here, my light just turned off in my office. Give me a second here. I apologize for that. But those are, those shots are not taken anymore in the NBA as teams have really studied. And that line at the bottom of your screen is really telling. The teams in the NBA have evolved, all right? They're finding the best shots in every possession, and they're eliminating the inefficient shots. The most valuable shots, and I think this is accurate across any level, are catch and shoot threes, all right? Shots where your guys know are coming and they can shoot it off the pass, and rim twos. And that's, that can be a post up, but it has to be to the rim, usually a drive, something that's, going towards the rim where you have the ability, obviously, to make the layup, to get fouled and get to the line, which is by far the most efficient way to score, or a shot that puts your teammates in good offensive rebounding possession to continue the possession if you did not make the layup. Okay. So this is a pretty cool graphic, something that I think you can learn from and see where the game has really changed at the NBA level. And this has trickled down, obviously, to college in the last 5 to 10 years. All right. This is a pretty neat part of in-game analytics, something that we've really tried to take advantage of here at the University of San Francisco. And it's interesting because it doesn't happen too often. Obviously, we play halves in college instead of quarters. So we only get 1, maybe 2 opportunities a game. Whereas, in a lot of high school teams play 4 quarters. Obviously, the NBA is 4 quarters where you have more opportunities. So this can be more effective in the high school level. I guess even though most places don't play in one-on-one, which is a key part of this. But nonetheless, I think it's something that everybody needs to be aware of, okay? So the question here is, should you foul before the half while your opponent's in the 1-and-1? And it's something that we've actually done and utilized very well a couple of times. And the way we think about it here at the University of San Francisco is, say your opponent has the ball, shot clock's off, and they're in the 1-and-1, meaning if you foul them, they're in the 1-and-1. All right. If you allow your opponent to just milk that clock and get the final shot of the half, they win the end of the half 0.8 to 0. Why? Because the average end of half possession is worth 0.8. All right. It's a little less than a normal possession, but If they get that possession and you don't get a shot, then they win 0.8-0. Okay. So what we like to do is create opportunities to give ourselves another offensive possession as long as we're not giving our opponent a more efficient possession. Okay. So I'm going to read this and hopefully it makes sense. But if the other team has the ball and you're in the single bonus, okay, if you can foul a 60% free throw shooter, it gives the other team on average, all right, a 0.6 plus a 0.36 if they make it for a 0.96 average point possession. All right. So people might say, well, why are you going to foul? You're increasing their efficiency. They went from 0.8 to 0.96. Yes, that is accurate. But what you also have to take into account is 40% of the time they're getting 0 points. All right. 60% of the time they're getting at least 1 point, but only 36% of the time are they getting 2 points, meaning both. All right. And it gives your offense another offensive possession, which equates to 0.8. All right. So on average, and this is really key here, if you see on this bullet, you would lose that last possession or two, 0.96 to 0.8. All right. Which is a delta of 0.16. Again, we're diving into the numbers here, but that 0.16 delta is much better than losing it 0.8-0, which is a 0.8 delta. Okay. And there's an article here. I'm not going to talk through it because it would take a little too long. But we executed this very well a couple years ago against Pacific. And it's something that they show good video content. I think the guy's name was Neil Johnson for ESPN that broke it down. And I would suggest watching that. It's about a 2 or 3 minute breakdown if anybody wants to learn a little bit more about it. And I believe this next slide is a great example of a team doing this in a tournament game, which gave them a great opportunity to win. All right. And this situation was a little different. This was at the under 4 media timeout of the ORU, Oral Roberts, Florida game in the tournament. Obviously, Florida was a little bit higher seed. ORU was a little bit of an underdog. But Coach Mills from ORU found a great opportunity as Florida was in the 1-1 to foul one of Florida's players who was only 8 for 16 from the foul line on the year. Okay. And why was that a smart move? All right. Well, Coach Mike White at Florida, great coach, obviously been incredibly successful, always runs great stuff after timeouts. So Coach Mills is like, all right, am I going to let Coach White and his team run it after timeout where they have a great opportunity to be successful? They're going to get the shot they want. All 5 guys on their team know what they want to get. Or am I going to take the game in my hands, foul a bad free throw shooter, and see if he can get out of his comfort zone and knock 2 down? All right. So I'm going to fast forward here to about the 45-second mark because you're going to see Florida is inbounding the ball here. All right.
89%.
They're up 1. Max. Inbound the ball. They bring it up.
Here we go.
They're getting into a little bit of horns action here. Looks like they're going to run some special. And as soon as that guy catches it, you see Oral Roberts' guy just attacks the ball. He's like, I'm going to foul this guy. I'm either going to get a steal or a foul. I'm not going to let them get to that handoff for Trey Mann, who ended up being a first-round pick. I'm going to make this guy beat me. Okay. So obviously they break that play up. Now they're in the 1-1. No problem at all. I'm going to fast forward here to 1 minute and 20 seconds into this clip. And you're going to see that this big fella for Florida gets to the line.
Teams.
All right.
But of course,
and he was shooting 50% on the year. Not sure where he was comfortable. Misses the 1-on-1. Oral Roberts gets the ball. And just like that, in the blink of an eye, Oral Roberts flipped the winning percentage of the game. They took the efficiency from Florida way down on their possession from probably, let's say they average about 1.1 out of a timeout to a 50% free throw shooter going to the line. I would guess that's somewhere around a 0.4, 0.5 average possession. All right. So a really, really smart move by Coach Mills. Oral Roberts goes on to win the game 81-78. And that action, just that one possession, all right, of them finding some incremental value to gain an advantage over Florida was a big reason as to why they're able to win that game. All right. Continuing on to another really important part of 2 foul participation. And this is definitely something that is really valuable across any level because I've seen coaches at our level do it, and I've seen a ton of coaches at the high school level do it. And it's something that I think needs to be discussed so people feel more comfortable. All right. I think one of the things, what 2 foul participation is how comfortable are you as a coach playing a guy that has 2 fouls in the first half? All right. And what you see a lot of coaches do, and I don't want to call them old school, but I think this is something that has been going on for a long time. If they have one of their players pick up 2 fouls in the first half, regardless of where they are in the half, they end up just pulling that guy and sitting him until halftime. Okay. And Ken Palm, who's someone that I have an incredible amount of respect for, has really kind of changed the way a lot of people think about the game at our level, has written some really good articles on this and talks about how when you auto bench somebody with 2 fouls, it ends up hurting you a lot more than you think. You know, a lot of coaches think, oh, I'm going to save that guy for the second half. When the game's on the line, I'm going to get him back out there. What people don't realize is that regardless of whether it's 2 minutes into the game or the final minute of the game, points are worth the same across all 40 minutes. All right. So if you're holding out a really good player from the 15-minute mark of the first half to the halftime, you're losing 15 minutes of game minutes where that guy can be changing the game for you. All right. So the goal is to maximize minutes with your best player. All right. Now you have to also know your personnel. There might be a situation where you have a big man who you just know because you've studied it well enough that you really don't trust him being on the floor with 2 fouls. Now, maybe that would cause for a reason to bring him out. Or maybe it's a guy that just picked up 2 fluky fouls and doesn't foul very often. Regardless, I think it's really important to not just throw that guy on the bench for the half, right? Because he might even pick up a third in the first half. That's fine. But he also might end the game with only 3 fouls. And if that's the case, you've wasted, let's say, 10, 12 minutes of the first half where this guy's just sitting over there on the bench and he doesn't even get close to fouling out. Those minutes are incredibly valuable. All right. You can't take the fouls home with you. It's better to come too close to the line. All right. It's even better to foul out with 3 minutes to go in the game if you can get 10 extra game minutes in the first half than saving that guy and then ending the game with him only having 3 fouls, all right, or 4 fouls, because again, all minutes are created equal, all right? So a good example, then to finish a game where your best player was auto bench for the first half with 2 fouls and 8 minutes left, finishes with 3 fouls for the game. Wouldn't you love to get those 8 minutes back in the first half? And I think all of us coaches, need to trust that a little bit and understand, like, how many guys really foul out very often? Not many, all right? So it's worth rolling the dice and having a little more of a risk appetite in those moments to understand that if that guy's a good player, someone that's going to help you win, it makes more sense to keep them on the floor and kind of roll the dice. Even if they pick up 3 in the first half, you have an opportunity to stretch that out in the second half. Okay. So those 3 areas, whether it be shot selection, fouling or not fouling, 2 for 1 is another area that I don't have a slide for on this presentation for timing purposes. But if there's any situation, again, high school coaches, I think it's something, especially if, in most places now that are playing with a shot clock, playing for 2 for 1s at the end of the quarter, super, super important. All right. I think it's an opportunity to always gain an incremental advantage against your opponent. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll share my email at the end of this presentation. And if anybody has any questions, you can email me about it. And I'm happy to send you some stuff on that. Okay. So as we go on, and again, this is something that I think is really important for all levels, whether it be high school, prep school, junior college, whatever level of Division 1, 2, or 3. How can you use analytics within your program to raise the bar? Okay. And we try to use it in every form or fashion here at San Francisco. And one thing that I like to tell coaches is a way to evaluate, your team in game across the season is measuring your team by Dean Oliver's 4 factors. All right. And the 4 factors are kind of a building block to the efficiency formula of basketball. And the 4 factors simply tell you why your team is good or why you're bad, what areas you need to get better in, what areas you're already significantly good in, and maybe there's other areas that you should focus on. All right. And talking through it and why is it valuable? All right. Firstly, I think effective field goal percentage is something that all of us need to evaluate our team by, as opposed to field goal percentage. All right. Why is that important? Because field goal percentage is definitely a little archaic in the way you look at how efficient your team is shooting the ball. All right. Because that doesn't take into effect the value of the 3. Effective field goal percentage, all right, computed from the field goals made, plus you get that extra 0.5 for a made 3. Why? Because 3s are 50% more valuable than 2s, right? 3 to 2. Then you divide them by the amount of field goals you take, all right? And as I mentioned, this differs from conventional field goal percentage by taking into account that extra 50% value for a made 3. These 2 boxes on the bottom of your screen here show the difference, right? If I had a team that was 14 for 40 from 2 and 7 for 16 from 3, I would look at my field goal percentage at 37.5%. Not great. not great. All right. But once I take into account the fact that 7 for 16 for three at 43.8% is super, super valuable, and then I take into account getting that extra 50% for those makes, I look and see my team field goal percentage in that moment is actually 43.8. Once I look at the effective field goal percentage as opposed to the regular field goal percentage. And again, that 43.8% number gives you a better understanding truly of where you are. All right. So use effective field goal percentage as opposed to field goal percentage over the course of a game and practice over the course of your season. All right. Same with turnovers. All right. I think percentages are a much better way of looking at it because percentages take into account the pace of the game. All right. And again, that's something that's incredibly important. If you're playing an 80 possession game, which in college would be pretty up and down, high pace, all right, that denominator of 80 possessions is big. All right. Whereas if you're playing a slow, grinded out game and you only play 65 possessions, 60 possessions, I mean, that's a 33% difference. So whether you have 14 turnovers in an 80 possession game or a 60 possession game, I mean, that's a huge difference. All right. And then when you look at the box score, you only see 14. You got to distinguish that by the pace of the game. All right. So if you have 13 turnovers in a 64 possession game, your team turnover possession would be 20.3. All right. Something I would say for high school teams, you should shoot for keeping that number around 20-21%. At the college level, I would say around 16% would get you in the top 100, top 75. If you're 15%, you're going to have a really good ball handling team, and you're going to give yourself a good opportunity to be successful. Moving to the next one, offensive rebounding percentage. All right, I think this is something that's really valuable because you keep it for both teams, and it gives you a great indication of how well you're rebounding the ball. All right, again, this is all ratios. I think ratios and percentages make a lot more sense than total numbers when evaluating. Again, because you're equating for that, or you're taking into account that pace of play. Offensive rebounding, so the amount of offensive rebounds you get divided by the opportunities. So really, it's the amount of offensive rebounds you get by the misses that your team has. All right. So if you have 15 opportunities, if you have 15 offensive rebounds out of 48 field goal and free throw misses, your offensive rebounding percentage would be 31.2. That's a really good number. Anything north of 30 is very good. Anything south of 25, not quite good enough. And if you're in that 25 to 30% range, I would say you're going to be pretty average. I would imagine at the high school level, you would want that number to be up a little higher, around 33% to be a very good rebounding team. Okay. And the same thing, you can do this to understand how good your defensive rebounding is, keeping it for your opponent. All right. So you're just determining how many offensive rebounds they get out of how many opportunities they have. And then if you can have a positive delta, let's say there's anything above 5% in regards to your offensive rebounding percentage compared to your opponents, it is fantastic. All right. If you can be on the upside of that 5%, get up to that 7% number, again, you're going to give your team more opportunities to win the game if you can take that into account. All right. And lastly, and this one's really important. Honestly, this was an area that we really struggled last year. And we're making a conscious effort to improve with our group this year, is free throw rate. Okay. And free throw rate defined is simply how many free throws you attempt divided by your team's field goal attempts. All right. We were a team that shot a lot of threes last year. We were a team that didn't have great scores inside. And so I think we were a great example of the old saying, you live and die by the three. And that's something that, to be as consistent, to raise your floor, to make sure that you give yourself a great opportunity to win on every night, you want to get to the line as often as possible, because on average at the Division I level, if you get to the line on a shooting foul, that's 1.4 points per possession. All right. Threes are about 1.05 and made twos are about 1.02, 1.03. If you can get to the line, you're going to be a really good team. All right. So if you shoot 20 free throws in a game and your team takes a total of 50 field goals, your free throw rate would be 40%. All right. That would be fantastic. I think you want to be, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I think, 35 to 40% at this level would be fantastic. And I think that's a good goal to shoot for. And similar to the rebounding, you want to recognize the delta between your free throw rate and your opponent's free throw rate. You want to get to the line a lot. You want to prevent your opponents from getting to the line a lot. If you can do that and create a significant gap between those two numbers, your team is going to be good if you can do that on a nightly basis. All right. So those are the 4 factors here. All right. And here are the averages, just something to look at. Effective field percentage. This is NCAA Division I from the 1920 season. 50.6 for the effective field goal, 18.5% for turnover rate, 28.4 for offensive rebounding rate, and 33.3 for free throw rate. All right. So there's some good baseline numbers to keep in mind when trying to implement this with your team so you can measure it. Obviously, at the high school level, I would think those numbers will be down just a little bit. But if your team is better in those areas, I think you're going to have a nice little squad. All right. Now, where do we stand in these different, whether it's games, practices, shooting, recruiting? I think these are all areas where you can kind of create incremental advantages against your opponent, as well as use it as teaching tools for your guys. All right. It's hard for student athletes to fight against hard data. And what I mean by that is, you can talk to them about, shot selection. You can talk about all these things. But when you take data to these guys and say, hey, you're shooting 60% in practice on catch and shoot threes, but you're shooting 35% on mid-range twos. I need you to limit those and shoot more catch and shoot threes. What are they going to say? No, coach, I want to shoot the more inefficient shot. And I'm like, all right, well, then you're not going to be playing very often. All right. It's a good way to explain to these guys what you want as a coach. And you can always pair your game film or practice film with this data to be able to give them a visual representation of the teaching points that you have based off this information. Right? What other areas do we use it in games? Plus minus data is huge. Now, that's not something that I would put too much weight into on a game basis. But once you get to about 4 or 5 games, this is something that you can really look at and distinguish. Certain guys are maybe they're playing more efficiently or your team is playing more efficiently when they're on the floor than maybe somebody else. You can try to do this in practice if you have enough players. We have 16 guys in our program, so we keep this in practice as well. And again, it's another teaching tool that we can use with our guys. All right. Defensive breakdowns. And again, this is simple. This is something that you can do as a coach. Even if you don't have a lot of, help in your program, maybe you can have a manager do it. Maybe you have good assistant coaches at the high school level. And it's just going through and keeping things like deflections, steals, something that we keep that I think is really important based upon your defensive system is defensive rotation errors. I think that's something that's a very tangible thing that you can be able to track and show your team, individuals at certain points if you feel like they need help, getting a better understanding of what they're doing wrong defensively. And that goes into this hustle chart as well, where that's similar to, some of these defensive stats, but it's the deflections, the charges, 50-50 balls, et cetera. And that's something that you can keep over the course of a game that I think is really helpful to talk about, at media timeouts at the college level, or maybe in between quarters at the high school level. Like, hey, fellas, they've gotten, 3 50-50 balls. We haven't gotten any. There's a reason why they have the lead. They're getting these extra possessions that over the course of the game are worth maybe 5 to 7 points. Okay. So those are different things in game that you can add onto what we discussed earlier in the conversation to give yourselves a better chance to win. All right. This is shot quality, something that we used last year. And as you can see, we were a team that spread it out. We were number 1 in the country in good spacing. We shot a ton of threes. That's why we were very volatile. And then we weren't good enough at attacking the rim. We weren't good enough at drawing fouls. And you can look at, if you look at these game breakdowns here at the bottom of your screen, it goes to show that when you shoot a lot of threes, sometimes it can be good, sometimes it's bad. You look at our first game where we lost to UMass Lowell, and they played a good game, but I think we settled a little too much in that game. And based on our shot quality, meaning based on average what we'd shoot on these shots, we would have won that game 74% of the time. But we didn't shoot the ball well from 3. All right. So that created that volatility that lowered our floor in regards to the outcome. And we ended up losing that game, a game we should win. All right. We played well and beat Towson. And then in the Virginia game where we made 13 threes on 28 attempts, it gave us a higher range of outcomes in terms of winning. We were only supposed to win that game based on our shooting, the shots we took 42% of the time. And we ended up getting a top 5 win in the country, beating them by 1. All right. So again, a lot of threes means more volatility. If you can get to the line more, shoot an efficient percentage from 2, you raise that floor, which I think all of us as coaches should aspire to do. All right. We talked about practice. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but again, it's just different ways to teach. And I think the best way to do it is it's a facts, not feelings type of thing. You give these guys tangible stats to look at. And again, pair it with the film is a great way to do it. So if you can afford to film your practices at the high school level, I would suggest doing so. And then getting on Hudl and breaking it down. It's a great teaching tool. All right. And I'll give you one little frame of reference for these stats that I think is really helpful is the ball handling. All right. Because in a box score, there's only two stats that you keep on a box score. It's assists and turnovers. But as we know as coaches, ball handling is a much broader spectrum than that, whether it's what we keep, which is virtual assists. A guy makes a great play, hits a wide open shooter, he shoots a three and misses it. That guy, your playmaker who found that guy that open shot, should be credited the same way whether he made or missed a shot. It shouldn't just be if he makes it that he gets an assist. So we keep a virtual assist category, which we assign the same amount of points as an assist. That way our guys are, they're giving credit for making the right play every time, regardless of the outcome. All right, shooting. I think this is an area that, especially at the high school level, you can really improve if you keep data on this. We do 8 to 10 shooting drills once or twice a week where we keep data on how our guys are doing so they can see themselves incrementally improving over the course of a fall or a spring workout. And it's just something that they can look at and say, all right, wow, all this extra time in the gym is paying off. I was shooting 70% in drills. Now I'm up to 73%. By the end of the summer, I want to be at 75%. And if you can get that improvement, obviously it will pay off and it'll translate to gains. All right. We compete in shooting. It's not something, we don't want our guys just coming to the gym and just getting up 100 shots just to get up 100 shots. We want them to document it. We want them to hold themselves accountable to see if they can improve from a day-to-day basis on shooting. All right. And this is something that we would keep here. You look at, this is actually back from when I was at Auburn. We did it there. We shot free throws. We did some mid-ranges, some threes, catch and shoot threes, transition drills. And I think as a coach, you need to identify what shots that you want your guys to take in games and then work on getting those guys to drill those shots in practice or on their own time. All right, recruiting. I think this is something that, one of my favorite stories. Back at Auburn, when I was a young assistant for Bruce Pearl, I fell in love with this young man named Anthony McLemore, who's playing for the Atlanta Celtics as a backup. Came in the game and was always super efficient, always had a good plus minus when he was on the floor, had a great rebounding rate, and it was very efficient finishing twos. And Bruce and I would go back and forth talking about it because he didn't start. He only played about 15 minutes a game. I think he averaged like 5 points and 4 rebounds a game in AAU. And I was steadfast on this and broke it down analytically. And you see these were the top 10 guys in the front court on the Adidas circuit that year. And you see guys like Tony Bradley, Jared Allen, Bam Adebayo, Bridges, Isaac. All these guys are in the NBA now. And Anthony was the 5th most efficient player out of that group in AAU when you took into account per 30 numbers as opposed to total averages. All right. So this goes back to why rates and percentages are more important than totals, because I sent this to Bruce. I said, hey, Anthony McLemore, I think would be really efficient. At worst, he's a good backup for us. I think he was a 4.0 student. He was a great kid. I said, this is a good guy for our program. Bruce, fortunately for me, was super receptive. Fortunately for him. And then Anthony McLemore ended up starting at center for Auburn on their Final Four team. So it was a great win story for us in recruiting, and why it's more important to try to dig deep and get as much data and information on these guys as you can. All right. And one of the last things that, I'd like to talk about is for coaches who are trying to think, all right, what's the best way? I want to be more analytically savvy with my program, but where do I start? What's the best thing that I can do initially to give my program a chance to get better? I think start with keeping those shooting numbers. It can be, at the beginning of your season, you want guys to improve. Show them, hey, when we started practice, you were only shooting 50% on these catch and shoot drills. Now you're up to 58%. Let's get that number up to 60. And it's a way to breed confidence. So it's a way to hold them more accountable. Like we talked about, tracking those 4 factors throughout your season, I think is really good. You can kind of see where your team has excelled, or you can see where you're deficient and try to get that right. Use rates, not totals. And then at the college level, I use kenpalm.com. Bart Torvik has a great website, and other analytical websites like Hoop Math, Hoop Lens, Hoop Vision. All right, a lot of the Open Look, all these guys guys do a really good job of creating, data and analytical breakdowns based off open source data that's out there that they can find off box scores and things like that. All right. So kind of, giving back to these guys, and none of these programs or subscriptions are very expensive. And at the high school level, I think you could probably get into these programs or subscriptions for under $100 across the board. And I think they're all very valuable and stuff that people can learn from. Okay. And that's it. That's the long and short of it. Winning in the margins. And I hope that this gave you new coaches to analytics a great understanding or a better understanding of how it can help your program. It's obviously been really beneficial for me as a coach and my program here at San Francisco. And I will continue using analytics as a way to find these incremental advantages against my opponents for as long as I can. So once again, appreciate Hudl quite a bit for having me on. Super pumped to be part of the first Swish 21 online clinic platform, and hope to see you guys again. My email, if anybody wants to send and ask any questions, is trgolden@usfca.edu. Again, that's trgolden@usfca.edu. Appreciate being with you guys today, and I hope all of you guys have a super safe and healthy, successful season. Thank you.